So let's continue. In chapters 5 and 6, we saw that whenever the interest rate or IY is higher, the present value is lower, right? So there was this negative relationship between the discount rate or the interest rate and the present value. And it remains true when we talk about bonds, right? Why would it be any different? It's the same. So IY, the interest rate, is called yield to maturity, and the present value in the context of bonds is the bond value, what we just did. So there is again a negative relationship between the yield to maturity and the bond value. So let's actually, kind of prove it. What we just did was an example with the yield to maturity, the interest rate, right, of 11%. We had 5 years to maturity, $1,000 face value on the bonds, 10% coupon rate. And the present value that we found earlier was $963.04. What if we lower the yield to maturity, the interest rate, from 11% to 10%? The negative relationship tells us that that should make the bond value higher. And if we repeated the financial calculator keys and only changed the IY from 11 to 10, we would get the higher bond value, and that would be $1,000. If you make the yield to maturity, the IY in the financial calculator, even lower, then the bond present value will become even higher because of the negative relationship between the two. And if we redid the calculations in the financial calculator, we would get the following answer: $1,079.85. That's the bond value at 8% yield to maturity, right? So as we lower the yield to maturity, we increase the bond value. So that's a negative relationship, just like what we saw in chapters 5 and 6. With a single cash flow or with multiple cash flows. Now notice how in the second example on the slide with the 10% yield to maturity, the bond value became exactly $1,000. Is it a coincidence? No. Turns out that whenever the coupon rate and the yield to maturity are identical, right? In our example, they are both 10%. You will always get the bond value of $1,000. You will always have $1,000. Even if the coupon rate is, let's say, 15% and the yield to maturity is 15%. As long as they are the same, you will always be getting $1,000. So if you know this trick, if you're given the same percentages for the coupon rate and the yield to maturity, don't even spend your time calculating the bond value. $1,000 is your answer. We also say that the bonds that sell at $1,000, which is their face value or par value, these bonds sell at par. If they sell for less than their par value, then they are known as discount bonds, right? So $963.04 is a discount bond. So it's like if you're an investor and you're buying such bond, which was issued by some company, you're kind of buying it at a discount, because when in the future you'll be receiving your interest payments, known as coupons, and then the last lump sum payment at the very end, which is $1,000, it's kind of like, you're lending less than what you're getting back. So you're lending $963, but you're getting back $1,000 in future value, in face value, together with all the interest until then. If instead the bond present value is above $1,000, like in the last case with the 8% yield to maturity, right? $1,079.85. That kind of bond is called a premium bond. And just to repeat again, whenever the yield to maturity or IY, right, like the discount rate, is above the coupon rate, you're always going to get the bond value below $1,000. That's a discount bond. If the yield to maturity and the coupon rate are the same percentage, you will always be getting $1,000. These bonds are set to sell at par. And premium bonds are the ones that are worth more than $1,000. And that's always going to happen when the yield to maturity is less than the coupon rate. So this is like, a little rule that you could always keep in mind when you do the calculations. So why does it even let's make a step back. What we just did was calculating the bond price or bond value for different discount rates. Why did we actually have to do all that? And that's because in the real world, interest rates are always fluctuating. We are going to cover this towards the end of this chapter, why, there are different things that are happening that get reflected in interest rates on bonds. So at this point, let's just, take it as given. Interest rates fluctuate over time. And because they do, bond value will also constantly fluctuate over time. And what this in turn implies is that if you bought a bond yesterday and paid some amount of money for it, then maybe if the interest rate went up overnight, then your bond value went down overnight. So what you paid a lot of money for yesterday is not worth as much money today. So as an investor, because of these constant fluctuations in interest rates on bonds, you're facing this risk of your bond value going down unexpectedly. Technically in finance, we would use the word risk when the price unexpectedly goes up. So any sort of fluctuations are referred to as risk in finance.